Feminism is everything to me. You know, it's the tapestry that weaves my life choices together. I've always stood on the shoulders of my foremothers, you know, women who bled, sweat, and cried so that future generations could have it that much better. You know, everything I do in life, every choice, I have to pause and reflect whether it would be disrespectful to that lineage. You know, I have my own brand of feminism. It has nothing to do with old school stereotypes. You know, I don't burn bras. I shop at Victoria's Secrets. You know, and heels under 4 inches are not sacrilegious. Feminism has various nuances, but I think the one unequivocal doctrine that we all have to adhere to is egalitarianism, you know, on a socioeconomic and legal level. Unfortunately, I think women just have myopic vision. You know, many of them are just on their quest to find a man, so they think they get further ahead in that department by casting aspersions at us or making jokes. And really what they're saying is, you know, I'm not going to be angry over gender injustice because it's not sexy to my boyfriend. You know, when you break it down, that's really what it is. I think they lack gratitude and kind of a historical understanding of how we came to have our current legal rights, you know, which were never considered inalienable by our Constitution writers. The funny thing is that they all want to reap the benefits of, you know, the waves of the female liberation movement. They vote, you know, they use birth control, they go to Planned Parenthood, they use domestic violence shelters, government child care, maternity leave. They get paid more on the dollar to men than they used to. They go to college, that's kind of big. You know, and feminism has opened up all these avenues. You know, to spit in his face is, you know, like the little black girl who doesn't have to stand in the back of the bus on the way to school. And then she gets to history class and she's like, we have to learn about Rosa Parks again. You know. You know, I really try not to be judgmental of my gender. I think we receive enough of that for 10 lifetimes, and I don't really want to be the addendum. You know, that being said, I think sometimes you have fantasies of, you know, being the catcher in the rye, or, you know, trying to save all these young girls before they fall off the cliff. But then again, I wouldn't have any video vixen interviews to read in men's magazines, which bring me so much joy. You know, in the UK, they call them fallen women, as if they've, you know, descended from grace. And I'm really of the belief that most of them have been pushed, you know, from an early age, from the men in their lives or the lack thereof. So I think we need to start at the alpha, you know, not the omega, and take a more holistic approach. No, you know, my personal opinion, a woman taking off her clothes or gyrating on poles indiscriminately to drooling men is not doing anything contributive to women as a whole. No matter how you want to justify it with 401ks or, you know, unionized health benefits, I think feminism and empowerment is much more than just having a choice. You know, throughout history, women have made choices to bind their feet, to cut off their genitals, to putting on burqas. So I think that's too simplistic a philosophy. When it comes to self-esteem, the downward spiral always begins within a comparative framework. You know, the lens of contrast. You know, you see someone who has a body part that you don't have that's valued by society. And I think mirrors and magazines, you know, fuel into this. But like if you go deep into the African continent, you know, to the remote tribal areas who aren't exposed to Western media, those girls' self-esteem is intact. You know, girls in rural Africa are not suffering from anorexia and bulimia. You know, I would even go so far as to say the women in the Bodoma tribe in Zimbabwe who suffer from body deformities probably have a stronger sense of self and self-esteem than most supermodels. You know, but if they move to Idaho, they'd be in therapy twice a week. You know, but then when you get to the more urbanized parts of Africa, you encounter the bleaching cream epidemic, and that's because those girls are sitting there all day watching Beyonce on TV. Patriarchy is the matrix to the beauty code, which is very inextricable for women. You know, we're programmed from a young age to cater to the desires of men. You know, it's a biological trait, and I think feminism, like science, is working to interfere with the natural world, you know, so we can kind of liberate ourselves from that second gaze and wearing these societal prescribed looking glasses that reflect men back as twice the size of who they really are. Male gaze is always going to exist. Men are morphologists, and we're their shapes that they study. And so consciously or subconsciously, they're always going to be trying to redefine our priorities, and it's up to us what we're going to do with it. You know, do we ignore it and liberate ourselves from it? Do we cater to it? Do we exploit it for monetary value and social status? And I think ultimately it's up to each individual woman to figure out how to exist within that paradigm and still maintain happiness and health. As a feminist, it's painful to see women who suffer from obesity or acne or anything that isn't deemed the Western archetype of pretty, you know, and they spend their lives trying to find this magical elixir to make themselves happy. I don't think it helps that we have people like Jennifer Hudson who are doing these orgasmic diet weight loss commercials as if they found a cure for AIDS. At some point, if the beauty industry isn't working for you, you just have to find a second marketing tool. You know, you have to be amusing, you have to be interesting, you have to be able to break down subjective idealism versus materialism. You know, find you a girl or guy who has more depth. I remember CeeLo Green said something like, you know, I may not be everybody's type, but I'm somebody's type. And I thought that was dope. How powerful is it? If even a fraction of the money that we spent on lipstick went to Planned Parenthood, it would be completely funded. You know, it's that powerful. It's so powerful that we support shoe designers on a crusade to give us plantar fasciitis. You know, I would even go so far as to say that the style industrial complex is more powerful than religion for women in the 21st century. And I know imams don't want to hear that, but ultimately the beauty code is going to be responsible for women throwing off their hijabs. You know, the instruction we receive from movies and music and magazines, it really distorts our sense of self. They have yet to create a dichotomy between beauty and pretty, you know, and they're not the same thing. You know, when I was growing up, I was taught that beauty wasn't something you could see or touch. You know, it's not your phenotype, it's not your body symmetry. There's actually a dope Chinese actress, her name is Zi Zhang. She was in Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, and Memoirs of a Geisha. And I remember she was doing an interview, and she's like, it's so weird, you know, when I got to America, all these men were telling me I was beautiful. She said, where I'm from, in my culture, men don't say that to you unless they've known you a long time. You know, and I thought that was dope because it means when you get the compliment, it's so much more than just associating you with a good person because you have nice cheekbones. For all the girls who are reading Vogue magazine looking for the average chick, you know, to me that's as ridiculous as looking through a luxury car magazine and trying to find the Hyundai. You know, if you can't flip through glossy pages and not feel bad about your cellulite, then you don't need to be reading them. I've never understood these girls who get all riled up and do the protests and boycotts and hunger strikes, you know, because they're upset that editors are photoshopping these models. And they, you know, they want these models to look less attractive so their self-esteem isn't slighted. And I don't get that. I mean, what are you going to do when you run into a model on the street who you deem perfect without Adobe? You know, are you going to cry yourself to sleep? At some point, it just gets ridiculous. Like, we have wars going on in the world right now. You know, if you have a fundamental issue with the model and the magazine industry, you should just not support it, as opposed to, you know, spending your energy trying to get them to change their marketing technique. If there's a demand for something, there's always going to be a supply. You know, that's basic Keynesian economics. I'm not going to waste my energy going after Loreal, and I'm definitely not going to empower any person or institution to dictate how I feel about myself. I think young girls aren't being initiated into the stages of womanhood the way they're supposed to by their mothers and their aunts and their sisters and their grandmothers. You know, we're kind of throwing them out into this battlefield with nothing but this notion of the white picket fence in the back of their mind, and that's criminal. You know, I think young girls need a little more Sun Tzu and less, you know, Chaucer and Vatsyayana. The French writer and social theorist Simone de Beauvoir once said, you know, I wasn't born a woman, I became one. You know, it's an existential philosophy, and it's about a transition. I think a lot of times we need to help them on this transition with literature. There are certain books that I think should be mandatory in high school. The Beauty Myth by Naomi Wolf, Women Who Run with the Wolves by Dr. Clarissa Estes. You know, these are books that changed my life. And I think Twain and Salinger and Fitzgerald are cool, but they're not really relevant to young girls who are on the brink of becoming women. Let's see, what else? I'm not really big on those affirmative mantras. I think it's kind of depressing that you have to look in the mirror and tell yourself how ostensibly great you are before you exit the house. Sometimes I feel it's trying too hard and it's fraudulent. Self-love isn't something that should have to be dictated on repeat. It's just something that blossoms and exists on its own strength. I'm suspect of those women who go around who have to scream about being Queen Nefertiti to everyone in earshot. I think it's important to learn vicariously through other women. I remember when I was in my early 20s and I would be privy to these conversations of women in their 40s. And I remember them saying like, man, I could have been going to law school. I could have been traveling the world. Instead I was chasing after this trifling dude. And I remember thinking to myself like, damn, I never want to be like that. Oscar Wilde once said women know life's too late. And I'm pretty sure that's what he was talking about.